So I'm going to ask you actually to switch on your mobile phones. I know that's counterintuitive. Usually in these sessions we say switch them off, put them on silent, etc. But you know, this is 2018. And actually if Will and I can't compete with this little device in your pocket, or big device, whatever it might be, then we're not doing a very good job anyway, are we really? So we want you, during this session, to respond to some of the stuff that we're doing via the medium of Twitter. So if anybody got a Twitter account in the room here, there's a couple of nods. Hopefully there's at least somebody in each row. We'll utilize that later at iManage, our Twitter feed. We're going to kind of get your responses dynamically and live via the medium, not of mime or dance, but of Twitter. So we'll see how that goes. More of that to come in just a moment. So here we go, Will.
Hello, I'm Will. So no guesses as to who is whom. We're going to spend this next half an hour looking at the idea of motivation and inspiration. What are the similarities? What are the differences? Where do they come from? And more importantly, how do you use them in a learning environment? So whether it's leadership training, whether it's coaching, whether it's you working on a long-term or short-term plan with your people, how do you utilize those things and feed them and fuel them for good? So Bob's going to talk you through the theory.
My theory, Bob's theory of motivation. I guess many of us in the room will have come across Steve Peters' book, The Chimp Paradox. Yeah, I guess a lot of people have had some connection with that. There's a chapter in that somewhere, I can't remember which chapter, but there's a little paragraph somewhere, and even a sentence that really hit me between the eyes, where he is talking about his work with Olympians and the British Olympic cycling team, and he says that motivation is worthless. He's quite kind of harsh on motivation. Motivation is worthless, he says. Commitment is everything. Now, I don't know why. I was driving along in my car listening to the audiobook version, and this kind of really resonated with me, because I thought for a long time that it's really hard as a manager to motivate people. How do you do that? Because motivation goes up and down, doesn't it? My own motivation goes up and down. Surely this is a very internal thing. One day I get up in the morning, I am absolutely up for going for the gym. Another morning, no way, I just don't want to go. And nobody's done anything. Nobody's impacted me in any way. This is just my internal motivation going up and down on different occasions, different circumstances. And therefore, how on earth, as a manager, are we expected to motivate people when this is all a kind of a complete moving feast? And who knows where your motivation is at any one moment? So this whole idea that commitment is everything got me thinking. And my little theory, there are holes in this theory, by the way, but my little theory started to emerge that said, well, actually, what will I commit to? Or maybe it's things I'm inspired to do. So I might not feel like going to the gym in the morning when I get up. But if I have been watching the marathon this last weekend and moving into next year, I'm really inspired to try and achieve that myself and run a marathon, then that might be the inspiration that I need that will help me to find the motivation that I might have from inside. So the inspiration comes from outside and the motivation comes from inside. So we called this Stop Motivating, Start Inspiring. We sold that to the CIPD and they said, yes, we'll have you for 30 minutes at 12:30 on Thursday to whatever it is. And then we started talking about it and maybe we've changed our mind a bit. I don't know.
Bob is essentially wrong, and we know that. It's a nice idea. We put it together for the CIPD, but there's so many holes in it. As we all know, inspiration comes from inside. That's what the word means, in spirit. It's inside you. It's the stuff that drives you. It's the emotion. And the way it works in business most of the time is we ignore inspiration and we focus on motivation. So businesses are absolutely consumed with having motivated workforces, motivated people. And it's all the external stuff that they put in place. So the motivation is, what's the aspiration? What's the goal? How can we entice you and induce you to be motivated? More money, more progression, bigger cars, positions, desks, whatever it is. And I think both of them potentially hold water, because actually if you can get to the nub of it, if you can get to the spirit of the person and they feel inspired, they may well be motivated. So we've been chatting about this, and this morning we've been around it 3 or 4 times, and actually it's hard to define whether inspiration is entirely inside, Because when you look at some people and you see what they do in the world, actually, there are people who've inspired me. They're not inside me, but they are people who I aspire to be like, or I enjoy what they do and I respect what they do. So maybe we need to nurture both inspiration and motivation and find out from your people which one it is that they're working with.
So there is a problem in all of this, isn't it? Because most organisations, the way they go about motivation is carrot and stick, isn't it? Now, in a major way, it's the carrot, so they move towards the goal, the outcome, the reward maybe that sits there in the future, or they run away from the fear-based stick. If I don't comply, if I don't succeed, then there's some kind of penalty that's going to come my way. Some negative consequence maybe. So it all becomes a bit pressured, maybe even a bit driven in that environment, but it lacks perhaps some of those elements of inspiration that we find in life. And there's lots of ways in which things inspire us, things and people inspire us in the world in which we live. So this is where we thought we would make this a little more interactive rather than just show and tell, okay? So the challenge that we want to put your way is to huddle in your rows, and as long as one person's got a Twitter feed, we would like you to tweet. All you need to do is put @iManage in the tweet somewhere. If you want, you can also put the CIPD LD show hashtag in there, which might kind of spread it further afield than just our little community right now. But what does it say? Who and what inspires you as individuals? Let's just take 2 minutes out, quick huddle, and we'll see what tweets come in. Can we do that? So see if we can achieve that? Yeah? Okay. So I am watching the Twitter feed. Let's see what happens. It's over to you for 2 minutes. Cool. Okay, we're getting some tweets in. Okay, so while you can carry on if you've got one mid-typing or about to enter one, still carry on with that. But we thought we would explore these a little bit. So we have one from Irina. Irina, somewhere here? We'll say, hey, right at the front here. This is nice and easy. So Irina's written, who inspires me? Smart people and underdogs. And what inspires me? Stories and success.
Can you expand slightly?
Sure. Anytime personally I'm faced with a difficult challenge or a difficult task or something I feel is next to impossible to accomplish, all I need to get inspired is to just find people that have done that, regardless of how difficult it was. And usually when the stacks are against you, the better the examples, and so I really do get inspired by that.
Cool. Very good.
So can I take from that you're getting inspiration from the other person, but you're also feeling it yourself because you may be the underdog? Okay, so both of our theories are holding water thus far.
Good. Okay,
Thank you.
Chris, you said Bob and Will inspire you.
Who's Chris? Where is he?
These are the flower pot men. Where is Chris?
Chris, expand, please.
Good. Okay, what else have we got? Nicola, you said what? Having autonomy. Interesting, is a word that may re-feature during this session. Purpose, creativity, fun. Who? Richard Branson, Jessica Innes Hill. So, Nicola, where are you, Nicola, if you dare surface? Yeah, okay, over here. Go on, Will. Run.
Some extra thoughts. Are we going to argue or are we going to talk?
Yeah, all of that. And food. That was another one. Motivation, inspiration.
Yeah.
Give me food, I'll do most things.
Yeah, well, we didn't have time, so we cut Jamie Oliver out of the presentation. But he's pretty inspiring. He's a bit passionate about stuff, loves his food. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Will's a bit of a foodie as well. There's a conversation with Will about food later.
You know why everybody's here? You know why everybody's here at 12:30? It's because it is lunchtime. It's the best place to get a seat. That's the inspiration and the motivation.
Yeah. Some others here. So we've got who and what inspires you? Tom. Children I teach, the difference I make to their lives. Yeah,
Please expand, Tom.
Yeah.
So in my day job, I teach kids how to be in rock bands, and
cool.
It's very cool. I do enjoy it. And some of them come from very unfortunate backgrounds. Some of them struggle a bit in life. So to see them after a few months of lessons or so, to actually own something and feel like, yes, I've got this. That in itself is inspiring. For them, for a child who's gone through some hardships, to be actually really, really happy and empowered. That's inspiring for myself. To
Yeah,
see.
super inspiring.
If a kid can
Yeah.
do that, then yeah, sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't people who work and nurture young people inspire us? I think that is something that does inspire us very often. Yeah, absolutely. So, good man. I was thinking that's a great thing to do. And it's rock and roll, which has got to be really cool. There are loads here coming in. Obviously, if you've got a Twitter feed, you can pick up on this, but maybe I'll just give a few. So, who or what inspires you? The urge to become better, make a difference. People who just go for it, no fear, meeting positive people. We've got people who aim high and put their work in and progression and new opportunities and work all that stuff. People who inspire us are managers and people who want to grow us as people, etc., etc. A whole load of ideas there. So there are many things in life, aren't there? There are many things in our walk of life that might move us into a place where we go, I have some aspiration because of that inspiration that has come my way. A few examples we picked out, some things that may well inspire us. I put this one: when someone comes to the aid of someone else who needs help. And there's lots of examples of that in the world, isn't there? We even have a whole industry around the Pride of Britain sort of TV shows, that, you know, the Weepy Awards thing, where we all sit with our handkerchiefs and kind of hearts pumping because these people have been generous and kind and giving and loving towards others. Do you remember the marathon? I'm sure it was last year, maybe it was the year before that, where there was that viral video of that guy who was kind of going towards the finish straight on like this, and somebody ran past him and then stopped and went back and put his arm over his shoulder and walked him across the line. And he was all over the media at that point, because we're inspired by people who help others and go the other mile. So that was one idea that I put up. Another one that I find inspiring, we talked about stories just a moment ago. I love a travel story. You know, I love a journey that people have made. I find that inspirational and aspirational. Both Will and I ride motorbikes. We could be the hairy bikers in another world. Maybe not me. Yeah. But a fantastic motorcycle journey book. If you ever want a good read, whether you're into motorcycles or not, there's a fantastic book called Touching the World by a lady called Kathy Birchall. And in Touching the World, she tells a story how she, as a 100% blind person, cannot see a thing, goes round the world on a motorbike. An old BMW on the back. Okay, she's not driving it, but she's on the back, and she literally does a global circumnavigation. And she's at the top of Machu Picchu, the Peruvian citadel thing, having had a grueling day as a blind person climbing that mountain. And she sits down, obviously in front of the citadel, and somebody sits next to her and says, "Why have you bothered?" And Kathy's reply is just a pure gem. She says, "What people see is predominantly shaped by what they want to see." And that's such a great idea from a blind person. What people see is predominantly shaped by what they see. These are brilliant, inspirational travel story. I love journeys. I think they are inspirational. Will, you've got a couple.
People who've overcome adversity. So we were chatting about different examples we thought resonated with us and with other people. And, you know, people see what they want to see. In adversity, often people see the downside. They see the negative. They see the challenge. So I'm sure everybody here remembers the story of the 14-year-old girl who was shot through the head by the Taliban, Malala. Now, that's pretty much adversity as far as I'm concerned. What has she done with it? Did it overcome her? No, she's become one of the global leaders. She stands out in terms of having a voice and using that voice in the face of adversity for women and girls' right to be educated. For me, that's hugely inspiring. I mean, I work with some people who, you know, struggle to be inspired on a program when they've turned up and they're being paid to do that sometimes. And I think, blimey, you're being invested in and people want you to do better. And all it's been a case of is you having to turn up and then be inspired. So how you overcome adversity, I think, is a huge factor in terms of your personal inspiration and your motivation. There's one other, on the next one we're going to talk about in terms of achievement against the odds. So Bob and I were running a program last year, and we were very lucky to run this program in Budapest. So a lot of people came from different locations to Budapest. It's a very nice city. And we decided to get somebody in to talk to the group at the end of the third day. And we asked around a little bit in advance of the program. And we managed to secure the services of the Hungarian national water polo team's coach. And we were like, well, that's quite good. Quite pleased with that. It'd be nice. And we were in this lovely hotel, and we couldn't work out why there were security guards everywhere and why there, like people cordoning off different areas. And we realised then that this guy is a hero in Hungary because water polo is their national sport. And this guy had turned up in the 1980s, having been a professional water polo player, to coach the team, which was on the bones of its backside, failing at the bottom of the league nationally and globally. And within the space of 4 years, he had taken that team to the first of 3 successive Olympic golds. And we had a discussion, hence why everywhere he goes, he is absolutely fated in Hungary. And we had a discussion with this group and said, what is it that you do? What is it that the team did in order for that to come true? And we touched on this notion of motivation and commitment and inspiration. And he said, were they motivated? Yeah, sort of. When he said, are you motivated to get a gold medal at the Olympics? They said, yes, we are, but it's 4 years away. And his challenge was enabling 15 people to turn up at 5 o'clock every morning and swim in a pool for 8 hours a day for 4 years when they didn't want to. So firstly, they needed a lot of commitment, but secondly, they needed a huge amount of inspiration, which was the day-to-day, how do I actually engage with doing something different? So back to my theory, obviously I'm right. Motivation is external. It's 4 years away, it's the Olympics. What gets you out of bed every morning to do something different that's going to lead to an Olympic gold? That's your inspiration and that's your commitment.
Okay, so there's a handout that if you haven't got, there may be a few left. Sal here will pass them around. If you want one, just pop up your hand. But this model on this page here, well, maybe what we're seeing and saying here is there's something to do with a push and a pull. There's this kind of motivational idea that is quite push in terms of setting up these things for people. And maybe we could call it performance management to some extent. You know, we're very good at setting some of this stuff in place. It's the normal kind of stuff that we do around, hierarchies, progression, outcomes, goals, slog, hard work, all those kind of things. But maybe alongside that then, there's another stream, which has to do with inspiring our people.
Yeah, and we would encourage you to think about how you contribute towards that, given that you're likely here because you're involved somehow or other in learning, development, coaching, whatever it might be, we experience lots of people want to invest lots here and slightly less here. So how do you get involved? What's your emotional commitment? How do you bring these things to life for the people in your organization? Whether that is leadership training, whether that's coaching, whether that's the care, support and interest that you and your organisation show towards your people. And there is a link between these, we think, which is of your own making. So how do you create a link between autonomy and position, progression, goals? How do you create a link that is meaningful for an individual or for a team that allows them to recognise that both they're motivated to get something, they're pushing towards something, but at the same time, they're pulling towards something through their own inspiration, their own emotion, and their own drive?
So we've converted this into a 4-box model, which you have to do, don't you? I think every consultant needs at least one original 4-box model in their back pocket. So we've invented this one, and it seems to be resonating a bit with organisations that we're talking to. This idea that we might have this kind of management, performance management, we could say motivation piece that is quite tangible about goals and outcomes and all of that good stuff that we do. But what if we tie that in with inspirational activity to create inspiration within our managers and within our teams? If you've only got the left-hand side of that, if you've only got the sort of the management piece of that, and this could not only be managers managing, but how I manage myself, that piece. If you've only got that, what we tend to see is this very driven, almost stressful motivation. I have to, I've got, carrot and stick. If I don't, then and it's kind of a pressured form of motivation within your team, within your organization. But equally, if we flip-flopped and said, let's forget that stuff and just inspire everyone, there's a real potential that you create this real shifting sand, this kind of this motivation that is fleeting. It might be there one moment, but then it's soon washed away in the kind of the sea of other things that are happening. It might raise its head for one moment, but then actually it disappears again. So we kind of figured if you've got neither of those things, you've got demotivation potentially. We had stress sustained shifting here. We had an S for this, but we're not allowed to put it on the screen. Actually, it's a little rude. But up the top right-hand side, if we think about inspiring people and doing the motivation piece, then potentially we can create an environment with more sustained motivation, where we're not only doing the carrot and stick stuff, but we're doing the aspirational stuff, we're doing the dream stuff, the vocation stuff, as opposed to the job and the slog stuff.
And so, what's the role in terms of anybody involved in L&D, development, coaching? Well, you can teach lots of stuff, and stuff goes only so far. Sometimes people remember it, and sometimes they don't. They might like it, they might not. But from our perspective, in this world of learning, these are three elements that we consider to be absolutely fundamental to creating sustained motivation, which is, if you create an environment and a climate and the behaviors that resonate both what you expect in other people and what you deliver, you've got the opportunity to create high-functioning teams. And we've got high-functioning teams because that is fundamentally different than a high-performing team. There's loads of high-performing teams out there, but there's not very many high-functioning teams out there. And if you can get a high-functioning team that's responsive, receptive, that's emotionally driven in a healthy way, you can do it through understanding the behavior of the environment and the climate. And our experience is that not many people focus on those things because we want achievable outcomes that we can measure. And it's quite hard to measure some of these things accurately. But you'll know when you're in an environment where the climate is good and it feels good and the behavior is appropriate. So from our perspective, how we create sustained motivation, high-functioning teams through environment, climate, and behavior.
And in many ways, just to really be simple about this, you could talk about, I'm on the mountain and it's rainy or it's sunny, and what do I do as a result of that? So, having that mix of those three things really starts to create an environment where people begin to function well together if we focus on all three, as opposed to potentially just focusing on one or two of them, which I think is a real common approach. So we would often have programs, or historically we'd see programs that focus on the behavior, the performance piece. We all do that, and we wouldn't say that's a bad thing. But if we only focus on that behavior piece of performance, then there's this danger that we might develop real pressurized motivation, this kind of high-stress motivation, as opposed to focusing on intervention that worry about the climate. What inspirational climate are we creating for that environment? We potentially start to generate motivation in a sustained way. So we like exploring this idea with teams and with organizations and helping people think that through in a little bit more detail. We would really love to continue the conversation with you. Our time's up. We've got about 2 minutes left or something. But we're on stand 439, which is literally down that corridor there. 3 or 4, 5 stands down, you'll find us. We would love you to come and have a chat about how this might work out in practice, and think about how maybe you start to design and develop and deliver learning development solutions that are working on all three of these levels to really create inspiring, motivated teams that's sustainable in what you do and throughout the different climates that your organizations will face. So thank you very much. Thank you, Will.
Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, we'll hopefully speak to you at some point on 439.